welcome to the very first episode of Naked Talk with Unprocessed Jess. I'm Jess Brassington, and I'm so excited to start this podcast and just be able to talk, right? It's all about candid conversations that talk about things that you're struggling with, but you don't know where to go for information, or maybe you're ashamed or you're just scared to talk about it to your close friends or your family. And I want to be that starting point to let you know that you're not alone and you don't have to be ashamed. Let's shed the shame and start the conversation so we can start the healing. So yes, Naked Talk, it's a movement. We're here to inspire women who've lost themselves in motherhood or building their career, and to get them to ignite their sexual and body confidence. Or they want to lead with passion and they want to live a healthy, fit life they love without guilt. I want to put emphasis on the without guilt part. And you know what I'm talking about. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you've struggled with guilt or shame in some area of your life. And as a holistic support guide, I am all about holistic health. And you might say, okay, hold up, Jess. Like, what does holistic mean? Holistic means all areas of your life are interconnected and they affect the other. So it's much more than looking hot naked and eating greens to experience true health. Although that is definitely a bonus, let me tell you, for so many reasons more than just meets the eye. But that's not all it is. You can have a banging body, be chomping on greens all day, hitting the gym, but you can be in a toxic relationship or have poor gut health and digestion, and you're not going to feel whole. You're not going to feel healthy. So I take a holistic approach to the topics that we talk about and give you things that you can do right now in your life to move towards a healthier you on the inside and the out. So during this podcast, you're going to hear some of my personal experiences, what worked for me and did not work for me. So you don't have to make the same mistakes I did, but also you can take something from what you hear and apply it to your own life. But you're also going to hear from holistic health professionals as well as real people, just like you and me, and they're in the midst of their struggles. Something about vulnerability creates connection. That's what I learned when I started sharing some of my story that I had been so ashamed of, or things I was going through, because it helps to know that you're not the only one with these questions or that's facing these situations. I felt so isolated for years with things I was going through, and it would have been so helpful for me to have someone to talk to, and even honestly just to listen to. It wasn't as prevalent back then. Even, all of this ways we can connect online, but even just hearing somebody that's going through it can really help. And I don't want that for you. I want you to know you're not alone. And I want to serve as a starting point for the conversations that need to be addressed around these issues, and then bringing in other people, their stories and their resources to help you get on the right track. So I hope you will join me on this journey. It may not look just like mine, and that's okay, but there's something you might be able to connect with through my story, the stories of our guests on here that you're going to hear from, and information from people who have either been through these things and come out on the other side and working towards their journey, and they're much further than they were, right? It's a process. I'm growing all the time too. But we want to surround ourselves. The more positivity and great energy that we hear, the better off we're going to be. So welcome to Naked Talk. I'm so excited that you've decided to listen. I'd love to know how you found the podcast, and I hope you'll continue to join me and others on our journey to whole health. And take away a little something from each episode that you can start using in your life right now. You don't have to wait for the perfect time, because guess what? It's never going to get here. So I want to share a little bit about me and what brought me to holistic health, and ultimately sharing this podcast with you. And even now, sometimes I just have to stop and remind myself that this is real. it's like pieces of the past feel like someone else's life, even though the pain is definitely a reminder in the crevices of my heart. And it does get easier and you move past that, but it also is a part of you. And I heard someone say the other day to me that they're comfortable in their shadow. And I thought that was a really good illustration that it is there as a reminder, but it doesn't have to define you, but we can learn from it and then we can help others. So I went from a college graduate and I was competing in beauty pageants. I was a beauty queen. One moment, it seemed like anyway to me, and then to a single mom in a really toxic relationship the next. And thinking back, looking up to that point, it looked okay from the outside. You know, if someone would have just checked on me, even people I grew up with or family that wasn't really close, it looked like everything was okay, but it definitely wasn't. And I know now that I realize there were wounds from my dad's death and just childhood tragedies I'd gone through and circumstances that I had left open, and not addressing those really affected every area of my life. And I lost my dad when it was my freshman year of college, and it was just devastating. And do you have that one person in your family or your life that they're just like, they're the glue? You know, they're the ones that are, whether it's the peacemaker or the gatherer that brings everyone together. Well, that was my dad. And without that glue, we just fell apart. And grief is a beast. It's unpredictable. And I had all kinds of emotions. I felt like it was going on all at once. And I just began looking for healing and love, but in all the wrong places. We didn't look to each other. We just kind of fractioned. It was like fractured pieces. And so I turned to my boyfriend at the time, and then it would be boyfriends after that, to kind of fill that void in my heart. And it's just one of those things with my father, my dad. I don't want to call my father. He was my dad. Like, it's just amazing. We were so close, and he just he believed in me, and he made me feel like I was so special. And I really thought I could do anything in this world. We did not come from a lot of money by any means, but I never felt really less than anybody. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I knew someone had my back. I knew someone saw my potential. And I was also really close with my grandma on my dad's side and my mom's parents as well. And I just kept looking and longing for that look that my dad gave me. It was just full of love and acceptance. But you know what? It never came. And it still makes me think, you know, it's just a really hard time. And you might be able to guess maybe what I did next. I don't know if it's something you can relate to, but I started saying, okay, well, you know, I was a people pleaser growing up. We had a lot of situations in our home life, and I'll probably get into those in later episodes. But if you can relate to maybe having strife in the home or a lot of stress, sometimes you want to go for attention in the wrong, you know, in an unhealthy way, or you want to blend in, or you just try to please and make it the easiest way. And I chose to be a people pleaser, and I didn't want any more problems. So going back to the pleasing, I just started eating less, and I started working out nonstop. And then that's when I started doing beauty pageants. And I thought, okay, I'm going to count every calorie, and I'm going to avoid fats at all costs. And it really began a love-hate relationship with food. And I just gave so much power to my weight. And then I just felt horrible when I couldn't control it. And it just reminded me how at the time, you know, I felt that love and acceptance was just so far out of reach. I just saw food as a necessary evil. I needed it to survive, but I just felt like it was sabotaging my efforts to be beautiful. Totally unhealthy, right? So it just got worse and worse, but I started winning more things, whether it was at my job or in the beauty pageants I did. I won the title for my city, and that made me feel beautiful. I'm not going to lie. Like, everyone clapping and thinking, oh, wow, this group of judges picked me, like me over everyone else, and putting the crown on my head. And everyone was so excited. It made me feel beautiful. But you know what? It was just for a while, because once I was back in the quietness, I just still felt empty. So that was not the answer either. Then I got through college and graduated, and I thought, okay, so there's another kind of a crown, right, to add to my life and collection. And nope, still didn't feel good. And so several boyfriends later, I found myself in a new relationship, and this time I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. And I left my apartment, moved in with him, and stopped working once she was born. I thought I was going to go back to work, and I thought, oh yeah, I'm not going to be one of those moms. You know, we have all the answers when we don't have kids, right? It gets so annoying to me when people without children make comments or different things, but I have to remember I was, in some respects, that annoying person, so give them grace. But had my daughter, and from the moment that she was born and our eyes connected, I was in love. I was just so in love, and I just wanted what was best for her. And so now my relationship that wasn't unhealthy, everything just seemed to be coming to the surface now that I had this other little life that I was in charge of. And when that unhealthy relationship turned unbearable, I'll go more into that later in the podcast, but I just said, no, whatever it takes, I'm out of here. I'm not going to live this life anymore. And it got bad. But now I was homeless. I didn't have a place. I didn't have a job. So I boarded a plane with my then 10-month-old baby, her stroller, our overnight bag, and $50 cash. And I flew to Houston and said I was going to my best friend's housewarming, which she did have that, but I had no intentions of coming back. And I was so scared, but that's what I wanted to do. I had left several times and went back. And this time I just said, I'm not, because I know God's going to replace what I have many times over. And He has 1,000 times over. And it's not just, financially or with a great husband. It's everything. So I encourage you, if you're going through something, really think about how it's affecting your health and your life, and reach out to somebody, get the help and support that you need. So as a last resort, I reached out to my mom. That was another very unhealthy relationship. And she said yes. And I struggle talking about my relationship with my mom. But, after hearing stories of others and friends that have shared about their relationship and books that they've written, I know I need to talk about it, because other people need to know about it, that they're not alone. I've shared that a lot of the reason I do this is because I felt so isolated in so many things. And one of those areas was my relationship with my mom. When you're surrounded by friends and even family members that have a good relationship, or a mom that isn't a narcissist or these different things, it can feel isolated because they cannot relate. So if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, you can relate to the toll it just takes on your health and your life. And I'll talk more about that as well. And also just from a holistic standpoint, and not at anger or bitterness, because I'm sure other people can understand you go through those emotions too, but it only does you harm if you allow it to. So getting the right support for that as well is so good. And also just everyone's different, but I've tried to approach it the best I can and have boundaries in place. And I really look forward to having more people on to talk about that, because it's something we need to address, whether it's family or a romantic relationship. So there I was in fetal position in my childhood bedroom where I grew up back home. And I just remember staring just at the wall, just blankly staring and thinking, how on earth did I get here? And it just seemed so unreal. And I could hear my daughter at the time just crying, and it just seemed so loud and pushed me down. I felt like on all sides, and the shame and the fear just set in even deeper. And then facing the day and seeing myself in the mirror, that just became like two things that I avoided. I hated it. I hated what I saw. When I looked in there, I just saw this single mom, broke and skinny. I was stressed and ashamed. And then I just started allowing my situation to define me as a person. And it was not a good situation to be in. So I just remember thinking, I'm just a shell of this person. I did what I had to do. I was nursing my daughter and never had energy. And I just felt like broken. And I was a shell of a person and alive, but I was not living. I knew that new moms had little to no sleep. That was not a surprise. So I just thought what I was going through was normal, but it apparently wasn't. And my family started getting really worried. I was sick all the time. They could definitely tell something was wrong. And I remember my brother and sister just sitting me down and telling me they thought I had postpartum depression or cancer, and they wanted me to go to the doctor. And I did, and my worst fear was confirmed. I was 4 months pregnant. I had felt really weird, but it was my first, time having a baby, and I was nursing, and my body had gone through all these changes. So I thought I could maybe be pregnant, but I wasn't sure. And I just remember thinking, like, what? This cannot be happening. And I contemplated abortion. I just thought there's no way. I'm already broke and destitute and desperate and can barely stay alive taking care of the baby I have because I wasn't eating, or I would eat. I was on WIC, and I remember we got carrots and beans and peanut butter. And so I would eat that. My mom would have to force me to eat. She'd make me a meal, and I just said, no, just, get diapers and wipes for my daughter, and I would nurse her. And I was just so sick all the time. And so I was pregnant, and I just thought, I can't do this. So I reached out to my ex-boyfriend and asked him for money because I had no money. And he refused. He said he was not going to be part of it, even though he was not part of taking care of the baby or our other baby. And I remember thinking, before that, in all these talks, I would have said, no, pro-life. How can you not be pro-life? But it was now that I was in that situation, it was me. It wasn't a political, but it was a personal thing. And it really forced me to look at myself and say, oh my gosh, how could I say something? I felt hypocritical. I felt ashamed. And I just had all these emotions going on at once, and I just felt alone. And even though I was living at my mom's and had, my best friend there and people, I just felt like I cannot do this. So I reached out to the local crisis pregnancy center, and I was in a single mom group at my church, and I just turned to them for support, and I chose to keep my baby, and it was not easy. I now had 2 babies under 18 months. I nursed my oldest until right before my second daughter was born. And I just remember sobbing in the hospital when my second daughter was born and feeling so hopeless and unwanted. And I just cried out to God and asked him, please get me through this. Get me through this time in my life. And he did. And I slowly began writing down things I was grateful for in my journal. And it wasn't a lot. It wasn't, because at the time I felt like there's nothing to be grateful for. But then I'd say, okay, that's stupid. You're alive. Your girls are alive. So I would start there. I had a roof over my head. And acknowledging and showing gratitude was a really big part of my mood and my mindset changing. And I just slowly got out more. I started building up my confidence again. And I eventually reconnected with the man who's now my husband. And I just remember him looking me in the eyes and telling me, don't you ever, ever feel like less because you have 2 children. And he just said he had never stopped loving me. And at that moment, I fell in love with him. And before, I just didn't feel worthy to fully accept his unconditional love. We'd met years before, but I was much younger, wasn't in a healthy place, and I just didn't appreciate him, honestly. You're younger and think, oh, the world's, there's this, the grass is greener. And then you get out there and realize, no, it's the same grass, and some of it's really dead and brown and horrible. And you just look at things a little differently. And he's a huge blessing in my life. He's so supportive of me and all the wacky adventures and things that I take him on and myself on. And we blended our family, his 2 boys, my 2 girls, and then we had a daughter to round out what we call the Brassington bunch. So now I have a wonderful husband. I'm financially secure, and I'm able to stay home with my girls and homeschool them. I mean, what more could I want, right? But now I went from one extreme to the other. So I became this hovering helicopter mom who thought if I only did everything right, listened to Christian radio, went to church, made sure my girls wore Bermuda shorts. Yes, I'm not joking. Then they wouldn't make the mistakes I made, and I was wrong. I became legalistic with my religion, and as you can probably imagine, that didn't turn out too well. So I was just stressed all the time. I lost myself in motherhood, and I just felt like I had to do everything right. And once again, when I missed the mark, I just felt horrible. And it wasn't the weight this time. It wasn't food. It wasn't the relationship. But now it was this whole parenting thing. And I was just exhausted by the end of the day from decisions and stressing and worrying too much. And when the kids were finally in bed, I had just no energy or even really a desire for myself or my husband. I just didn't have that, and we didn't argue, and things were okay. But who wants okay? What I'd gone through in life, I just finally said, no, this is ridiculous. I just finally clicked and said, I want my life back. I want to take time for my relationship with myself first and my husband. We were, like I said, we got along fine. We didn't argue, but I wanted to laugh. I wanted to play. I wanted to flirt with my husband. I wanted to initiate sex again and not feel like it was a chore or it was just to please him. And the thing is, the crazy part looking back, my husband wanted to please me. But I see this a lot of times as women. We think, not everyone, but depending how sex was viewed growing up or our relationship with sex, it's to please the man. And we're missing out, because if it's someone who cares about you, your partner wants to see you pleased, and it's turning them on. But we're over here not getting turned on or pleased, trying to please the other person. And it's just this crazy vicious circle. So let's stop. And there's that combination of parenting, homeschooling, and all the guilt I had around sex, especially now because I was pregnant and then single mom. It just really affected me, and it took a toll on me. But I decided just to face it head on and reclaim my body and my sexuality. And let me tell you, I'm so glad I did. I love sex now, and I just continue to learn about my body and my desires. And there's just so much shame and lack of knowledge around sex, and it's such a big part of our health. So let's talk about it. That is another big reason that I started this podcast, because as a holistic support guide and coach, I just heard too many people saying they lacked sleep and they lacked sexual intimacy or communication. That was just missing. So let's talk about it. Let's be real. And I thought, I just want to talk to you. Start those conversations, like I've said before, that we're too embarrassed to talk about, or if it's a question we have, we're not even asking our doctors. And if we can't communicate that with our gynecologist or our OB, who can we talk to about it? We should be able to go to them with anything about our bodies and not be ashamed, because I guarantee you, you're not the only one going through it. So if that's you, be listening for the Naked Talk episodes. Make sure you subscribe so you're notified when the new ones come out, because we are going to be getting uncomfortable on here and asking those questions. And I'm really excited to see the results of that. I want to share one more thing that I'm really passionate about, and that is our veterans. In 2015, we lost my brother to combat PTSD-induced suicide, and it was devastating for our whole family and, of course, his friends in his life. And it was really hard just watching the things happen to him and knowing that he was slipping further and further away and there was nothing I could do about it. And my sister and brother and I were really close, especially with the chaos that we went through at home a lot of times in our childhood, and especially after losing our dad. And he was an Army veteran. He was not the same when he came home from the military. And we saw that early on, but it got worse and worse. And we tried to help. He did programs and different things, and just nothing seemed to work. He was going to go to a place here in Houston called Camp Hope, and it's a really great place. It is transitional housing for veterans, and they use peer-to-peer mentoring. And so it is not a treatment facility, but that is what our veterans need. They need people who can relate to them and who can let them know that they're not alone. So he was going to go there on a Tuesday, and he died on the Thursday before that. So it's very important for me to talk about things and mental health in general, but especially for our veterans and their families. And when they come home from war, a new war begins, and in their minds and bodies, and we need to do more to help them. So I'll be talking about that in the podcast as well as bringing resources. So that is a little bit or a lot about me, and this is Naked Talk, candid convos about sex, sleep, and the pursuit of healthiness. There are so many layers to me, as I'm sure there are to you too. So let's just peel them back together and learn in the process. Episode 2 is sex and sleep, how to get more of it. So I totally think you should listen. Make sure you subscribe so you'll know when new episodes come out. If you're anything like me, you're probably busy all the time. You have 1,000,001 things to do, and you might like something, but if you're not reminded, you'll forget and get sidetracked, right? So what this will do is let you know, hey, a new episode's out, and you can either start playing it right then if you're in your car, at the gym, or messing around, or at least you know, okay, that's out and I'm going to listen to it soon. So please do that, and I will talk to you in episode 2.